The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild is often considered the best Zelda game, and is a must-own title for Switch owners. However, even with all the praise it receives, there are still some flaws many fans point out, with the biggest being its story. In my opinion, it wasn't terrible, but the shift in focus to gameplay rubbed some the wrong way, since the plot was brushed to the side. The characters were one-dimensional and barely had any development. If it wasn't for the voice acting, which helped convey their personalities, all of them are pretty forgettable compared to other characters in the series. Fast forward to over 3 years later, where Nintendo asks, "Hey, do you want to play a game that takes place during the Calamity's revival and watch everybody die?" And I'm just like, oh, heck yeah! Hyrule Warriors, Age of Calamity, a prequel to Breath of the Wild, allowing everyone to play as the champions of Hyrule, and showing what took place 100 years prior to Ganon's revival. After the success of the first Hyrule Warriors, I can understand why they chose this style to tell its narrative. Age of Calamity has already sold over 3 million copies, and is at least a financial success. But as a game, it certainly is a disappointment. I already knew what I was getting into since I played its predecessor on the Wii U. You still decimate hordes of enemies with ease and capture enemy keeps as a one-man army, but this time it puts a Breath of the Wild spin on it. Every combat mechanic from Breath of the Wild is added to the gameplay, including perfect dodges, parries, magic rods, the Sheikah Slate runes, and food. It's crazy how well it actually all works in the game, and the best part of all is, your weapons don't break. This leads to an incredibly offensive, fast-paced action game. One of my main problems with the tougher enemies in Hyrule Warriors was how often they guarded attacks, but in Age of Calamity, any character is able to inflict consistent damage. The perfect dodge is the optimal way to deal with them, which allows you to perform a flurry strike that whittles down the enemy's weakness gauge. Once it's depleted, it will allow for a powerful attack, damaging not just the target, but enemies around them as well. The 4 elemental rods can also make the meter appear, and casting the correct magic on an enemy will deplete it even faster. Combining the rods with the perfect dodge can make bosses an absolute joke, like I did with the Blight Ganon here. The best part about it all is that every character in the game can utilize these mechanics. Each warrior has a unique playstyle that will gear toward dealing with enemy mobs quickly or excelling in one-on-one combat. My favorites to use are characters who are fast and can fill up their special gauges quickly, like Mipha and Impa. Mipha can create pools of water on the ground and teleport to nearby enemies, and Naruto can use the Shadow Clone Jutsu. Just look at how fast their special gauge increases. It's honestly a little broken if you ask me.
Believe it!
Personally, Daruk and Revali are underwhelming. They're just too slow and don't do enough damage, but at least Revali's bow can deal with hordes easily. The champions are not the only playable characters, as you can also play as other side characters from Breath of the Wild. You see, Nintendo knew if they didn't include Hetsu in the game, Zelda fans would have had to riot.
Why are you so ugly, bro?
Which characters are fun to play will depend on whoever picks up the controller, but the Divine Beasts are boring no matter which one you pilot. That's right, you can control the Divine Beasts and take on thousands of enemies with no thought whatsoever. All that's needed to do is to hold down the R button and occasionally tap the L button to block incoming attacks. There are only a few points in the game where controlling these mechanized beasts are required, so in the grand scheme of things, it's pretty minor. Besides bringing over characters and gameplay mechanics from Breath of the Wild, Age of Calamity also attempted to bring over the exploration aspect, and I use the word exploration very loosely here. Most of the maps are linear, and it's not hard to find secrets at all. I do appreciate the thought, but replicating Breath of the Wild's feeling of exploration is hard to do in a warrior-style game, and is small potatoes compared to the main issues of the game. Have you ever asked someone for the definition of monotony and they said, "Have you ever played Dynasty Warriors?" Describing Warriors games like this is inescapable, but I wouldn't say it's because of the main campaign. Like the original Hyrule Warriors, if you focus on the story mode only, you may not get burnt out on the gameplay, but Age of Calamity is a completely different story. This time around, the game is based on a mission structure, which blends story and side quest together. They can be selected at any time, and each have certain restrictions, such as only using certain characters or beat a certain amount of enemies within a time limit. Main quests don't fall into the realm of monotony, but the side quests certainly do when grinding to upgrade your characters. There are icons that appear on the map that allow you to come up with new recipes to give stat buffs before battle, building new shops, or as stated already, upgrade characters. In order to complete these, you need the required materials. And how do you get those? By completing side quests. The problem is they barely have any variety to them. It's always kill this many enemies, and beat this Lionel for the millionth time. It also doesn't help that certain maps have similar layouts to one another. I can hear you say, well, just ignore them and go straight for the story missions. And I can only respond with, how did you get in my house? Every quest in the game has a recommended level next to them. I played this game on hard, so I can't speak for how it is on lower difficulties, but when one of my characters were at a lower level and lacked necessary firepower, it might as well have been a level 5 Magikarp versus a team of 6 legendary Pokemon at level 100. And Godzilla. It's definitely worth grinding to improve the characters because you never know when they might be required for a mission. It also doesn't help when the frame rate constantly dips, making this game look like a slideshow. This didn't bother me in the first game, but it's way more noticeable and seems to happen more often in Age of Calamity. It's not like the game is graphically intense either. Yes, it keeps the same style as Breath of the Wild, but there is a noticeable downgrade in quality. However, that's to be expected. Even with the frame rate drops, the music is at least able to keep up with the intensity of battle. Many compositions get remixes, and they all sound great, with my personal favorites being the champion themes. In the beginning of the review, I said the game is disappointing, and part of it is due to the points I just mentioned, but the biggest reason is the story. Age of Calamity's plot definitely wasn't what I was expecting. It starts off with a familiar scene of Calamity Ganon unleashing its wrath upon all of Hyrule, but with one key difference. A little guardian awakens from its slumber and proceeds to hop through a portal it created. What did this little guardian do?
Time travel!
That's right, this tiny guardian travels back in time to try to help our heroes from having that future happen. From here on out, I realized the plot was not going to follow any of the memory cutscenes found in Breath of the Wild. I was hoping this game would expand upon some of those memories from the source material, but none of those exist in this game, and that's because Age of Calamity has very little to do with Breath of the Wild. Sure, everything is based on it, but only in setting and characters. In fact, characters from the future end up saving the previous champions, and it's implied that they come from the timeline of the original game. I know the argument can be made it's a spin-off and it doesn't really matter, but I was expecting an Infinity War, not Endgame, based on how it was being advertised.
This became the only game that will let you experience the world 100 years prior to the events of The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild firsthand.
So everyone gets a happy ending. Yay. But my biggest gripe is with the characters. The plot adds nothing new to them at all. In fact, the DLC from Breath of the Wild added more to their backstories than this game does. Even though this game is not a true prequel, I would have loved to see more moments with Mipha and Link since she was sort of in love with him, or even see the relationship between Urbosa and Zelda expanded upon. This was all presented in Breath of the Wild, and the fact that these extra details are tossed to the side irks me. These moments could have made us learn more about all these champions and the relationship between them all as a group. Some of the negatives I mentioned, specifically the plot, may not bother some, but to me, this was a missed opportunity. I wouldn't exactly recommend this to anyone unless you're a die-hard fan of Breath of the Wild, which is Age of Calamity's target demographic. The main source of fun offered in this game for me was the combat mechanics, but I don't think it's worth the $60 price tag just for that. But what do I know? I'm just some random guy on the internet that wanted to review Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity. Remember to like this video and subscribe for more game reviews, and I'll see you next time.